Back to the third half, everybody. Who's next, Freddie?
Tommy, our next guest is Mr. Andrew McCarthy.
Now,
Hello, sir.
very, very glad to meet you.
Hello, sir. How are
Very
you?
glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I saw your face on a bus in Dublin, and I thought to myself, he might turn up. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Nice to see you.
Very, very nice to meet you. You're doing The Crucible.
Yes, I am, yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, if Andrew McCarthy came out, what would I ask him? So I have a load of questions already.
We'll start with Molly Ringwald, I imagine. Yeah.
What I'm very curious about is the acting story. And my projection onto you would be that there was this time of super fame and super profile in the, I can't remember when, the 80s into the 90s, whenever that time was. And then that you kind of disappeared. And this Crucible thing is, I can't remember the last time that I saw your face on something. That's the outside projection. And I was thinking, from the actor's point of view, it's probably just you're always working. You're always doing stuff, and some things are high and some things are low, and you're not really in control of that. So I'd love you to tell me that story from your perspective as a working actor.
Well, my story might be a little different than you think in that regard, but because I did get so sort of quickly successful when I was young, it altered my life in a way that I was not expecting and or prepared for. And then because, I don't know how much context you want, you know, this thing called the Brat Pack was created.
Totally.
In the media that altered how we and I were perceived. You know, it's one of those things where a label was thrown on right away and it altered the trajectory of my career. And I felt like when that happened, my hands were taken off the steering wheel and I wasn't in control of what was going on. And I was sort of presented in a certain way, which I felt like, wait a minute, I'm a 22-year-old kid, I'm just starting to be successful, this is really wonderful and exciting, and now what just happened? Now I'm a part of this thing.
Can you talk me through how it all started? So where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
And I went to New York University when I was 17 years old. I wanted to be a theater actor, and so I went to New Jersey, and so I went to NYU, and I went for 2 years, and then I was kicked out of college.
For?
I didn't go to my classes. I went to my acting classes, but I didn't go to my, my school classes. And but 2 weeks later, a friend of mine called me up and said, there's an ad in the newspaper. They're looking for someone 18, vulnerable, and sensitive to be the lead in the movie. And I was like, dude. So I went to an open call, which is anyone can go, right? And I sat with 500 other 18 vulnerable and sensitive kids for a couple hours and waited and walked in. And, 10 auditions later, I was the lead in the movie. It was like winning the lottery. And anyway, so
Which movie was that?
It was called Class. And it was not very successful at all.
Okay.
And anyway, so then I did a couple movies, and then I did a movie called St. Elmo's Fire, and then a movie called Pretty in Pink, and those became very successful.
Which is the one that was, you were locked in the school overnight?
No, that was not me. See, that was The Breakfast Club.
Why weren't you in that?
Even my kids think I was in that.
Really?
My 12-year-old who's never seen me in anything goes, Dad, one of my classmates saw you in The Breakfast Club. And I go, no, they didn't, sweetheart. Because, are you sure, Dad?
Oh, wow,
yeah, pretty
that's great.
sure. Anyway, so these movies all became, they captured a moment in time for people. That was when, it's a long story, I suppose, but, cinema changed kind of overnight. Hollywood realized young people went to movies. And so overnight, they began making movies for and about young people. And I happened to be in that time, in that place, at that moment, and fit the wardrobe. And I was in all these movies. And so
it was more than fitting the wardrobe, Doug, thing. It was people got to be seen through you.
Sure. Those movies took young people seriously in a way that they hadn't before. That's what John Hughes did that very well. He gave people young people a sense of dignity and that, I see you.
But what you was a vulnerability.
Sure. Yeah.
That I think was really important actually for young fellas our age to see.
Well, I was that. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
was vulnerable and open, and yeah, I mean, so that made me famous to a certain generation at that time. Yeah.
So those movies go out. How many of them were there altogether?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard. Well, there's no like who's in the Brat Pack. I mean, there's no official list, So I mean, I don't know. I did a dozen of these kind of movies.
And then like you're going to explain to me from your perspective, so I have this image of Andrew McCarthy. Oh wow, and then and then here again. So what from your inside, what was going on?
Well, I think I struggled or fought against for a long time the notion of feeling pigeonholed in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like that, and I struggled against that. And I also drank too much when I was younger. And, people often say to me, oh, well, you're too young for success, and so you drank. And I'm like, no, success just let me drink better vodka, but I would have drunk the vodka anyway. So I think, and I wasn't particularly, and that sort of derailed me for several years, and then it took me several years to actually do something about it. The worst thing that happened to me in diving down that drink hole turned out to be a real blessing to me. Not stopping drinking, of course that was a blessing, but the act itself of drinking and losing myself to that, it's like that the cracked vase lasts longest kind of thing. That's turned into my greatest sense of strength in a certain way, or because I learned things about myself. And anyway, so my career got lost in myself for a number of years.
Was there always work?
Yeah, I always was doing kind of things, and then at a certain point, I started traveling the world alone. When I stopped drinking, I started traveling the world by myself, just because I realized how fearful I was in the world, I walked across Spain on the Camino de Santiago almost 30 years ago, and I realized right in the middle of it, I sort of had this breakdown where I just had a sobbing little fit, and I had this sort of white light experience, and I realized how much fear had dominated my life and how it had controlled and made decisions for me, and so much so that I was not aware of its existence in my life until that instant of its first absence, and I suddenly felt like me. I felt like, my wife is Irish, and she has, one of these Irish sayings is, I felt like myself from the toes up. And in that instant, I felt like when fear was lifted from me for that moment, I felt like myself. I said, oh, there I am.
How long did that last?
It lasted a few minutes. I had this sort of meltdown. I just had a tantrum, really, in the middle of this wheat field. And then the realization of it, like so many things in my life, the realization came a few days later. I was sitting by a bar and eating a little piece of cheese, and I had that realization, oh my God. I was aware of being able to see very crisply and hear very sharply, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm really awake. And then I realized I don't have any fucking fear right now. I feel like me. Don't tell anybody. And then the fear comes in and goes, don't tell anybody, because you'll get whacked. You know what I mean? And so for the rest of my life since that 30 years ago, it's been a constant open that door, it wants to close. Open that door and close it. And so anyway, that led to me traveling the world a lot, and I became a travel writer. So I sort of left acting behind and became a travel writer full time, and I worked with National Geographic Travel. Anyway, for years I did that, and then that led to books, and then...
Tell me about writing.
Well, I mean, I just like to I like to make stuff. I like to make anything. Doesn't even matter what it is, whether it's acting, whether it's writing. I direct a lot of television, whether it's directing, whatever it is. I like, if it's good, it's better, but you just want to make stuff. You feel like, that's how we locate ourselves, right? That's how I locate myself. I like to write.
Was it novels that you did as well?
No, I've written a novel, but I've mostly travel books and memoir and travel kind of personal travel books, And as I got older, I left acting for a number of years when I was travel writing exclusively, and then when I direct a lot of television, like I say, so for 10 years, more, 15 years, I didn't act at all. So to go back to acting, particularly now, I haven't done a play in 20 years, and I'm doing this play now, The Crucible, and it's like, what do I have? What's different in my tool chest now than there was before? What don't I have that I used to have, and what do I not need to try to have now? And that's interesting.
I can see you as a kind of an evil Republican senator.
That's outrageous. I'm out of here. Well, I mean, in The Crucible, I'm playing very much, I'm playing the judge, which was interesting. They said, do you want to do The Crucible? And I'm like, I'm a little old for John Proctor. And they go, no, not to play John Proctor, to play the old judge. And I'm like, jeez, Chris, okay. But no one ever thinks they're evil. Evil people don't think they're evil. Everybody just thinks they're right.
No, but you have an intensity, you have a stare now that...
Well, I don't know.
I can see it. Anyway, did you, in terms of money, did you make enough during the Brat Pack years to kind of see you through? Or was there a time when you said, oh, I have to start earning now?
Well, I mean, no, I was paid nothing for those movies. That was before the heyday of, actors getting their $20 million. Right before it. I mean, I made, $50,000 for a movie or something, which was a lot of money to me then. But it was certainly not enough to see you 30, 40 years later through. So I've always had to earn a living, which has been good for me and, stressful, like anyone who's trying to, the worst part about being an actor, in my experience, is being the freelancer nature of it. I've had hundreds of jobs, and I'm always looking for a next job or, that kind of thing. So that to me has always been the worst, toughest part of acting.
Tell us about the TV shows you've directed.
I directed a lot of the show called Orange is the New Black when that was on.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I had just started directing, and that was when streaming wasn't really streaming yet, if we can remember such a time. And a friend of mine was producing the show, and they said, do you want to direct one of the episodes? We can't get anybody to direct this thing because it's going to be on, I think, Netflix. And I'm like, well, doesn't Netflix, they mail you DVDs. What do you mean it's on Netflix? They go, they're going to be streaming. I'm like, okay, well, what channel is it on? Like, no, it's anyway, I couldn't understand it. And they couldn't get anyone to direct it because nobody knew what streaming was. So I said, I'll direct it. I don't have a job. And I directed a bunch of them. Then streaming happened, and it was one of, I think the second show on Netflix, and it was this overnight hit. So suddenly I was a great director because I directed a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So then I was just given tons of work. I directed a bunch, about 100 hours of television. So, and because I was an actor, I could get very subjective. I understood all the actor neuroses because I have them all, so I could talk to actors easily. And so I was, and I'm very impatient, and I've been on a set most of my life, so I understand where time is wasted, so I could be very fast, I'd be decisive, which is those two things you need to be in television. And if they really just want it done by 5 o'clock. If you have a few good ideas, my God, you're Orson Welles. I'm being a little cynical, but not too much. Sure,
yeah. What type of preparation work do you have to do for something like The Judge in The Crucible?
For me, the challenge of it is not asserting, because he's in complete authority of the room. And I can have a feeling that I'm not man enough, not powerful enough. Well, you're, little voice there. It says, and so consequently,
you totally have that.
Consequently, one tends to overassert when you have that. When you overassert, it's weakness, and for anybody who's perceptive enough, you can see its weakness, and people do it all the time. You say, oh, look at our president. It's just weakness. All that stuff is all I see is weakness, and weakness is fine, but not if you can do harm to people, because people do, and that fear, and it's fear and weakness. So I can fear that I'm not enough. And so it's like trusting this is enough. Maybe it comes from my father. My father was a very dominant man. I was afraid of him, whatever it is. I still, these many decades later, truth be told, can have that fear that I am not enough. And so it's just holding the space, even though I have that fear. 51% of me has to have the trust that I am holding the space, even if 49% is, you're not enough. They're going to laugh at you. They think you're weak. You know what I mean? And battling those internal things, balancing or just not listening to that voice, And so for me, that is the challenge in this part. And now when I say that to you, I feel very vulnerable. But that's okay. But that's and that's a valuable use of my time. And in my life, that will reward me. And as a parent of my kids, that will reward me. That vulnerability will give me a strength. You know what I mean? As opposed to asserting and being angry and all that stuff, which is just not. Anger is always fear, right? And fear. We're so fearful as people. And so to just own the fear and be able to sit there and go, no, sir, you cannot do that. And, you know, that'll be my challenge, nightly.
When you were talking about directing...
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, but when you were talking about directing, you had it, authority. You know, do you find that if you're traveling, do you find people are kind of going... I mean, I often find that as whatever my energy is. If I'm really feeling like... people will notice me. You know, I don't notice it when, you know, it doesn't happen near as much here as it does in New York, and so, or in America. But my wife tells me about it all the time. She goes, that person just stop talking. They're listening to everything you say. I'm like, who? Like, I've kind of got, otherwise I'm, you know, but I'm not Brad Pitt, you know what I mean? So it's a weird phenomenon because I'm to a certain, like say, certain demographic of a certain generation, be like, oh my God, when I was young. And other people will go, yeah. Who is it? You know what I mean? So it's a weird one. Yeah, but it's the thing as well of, you were so beautiful though. I guess that's, I mean, that's, that happened. You were so beautiful. I mean, I've overloaded the word there. But you know what I mean? That was, I mean... Well, I had, at that moment, like I said earlier, you know, it's like, I'm not comparing myself all to James Dean in East of Eden, to Leonardo DiCaprio in that Gilbert Grape movie. So, sure. There's a moment of blossom that is so attractive, and it is a quality, it's not a talent, and it passes. It's just like, oh, God, and it's really attractive, and everybody wants it, and so people come at it. And you can survive that or you can't. I didn't particularly very well, but that's a really interesting, and it is a moment in time, you know, and then Leonardo DiCaprio grows up and becomes whatever actor he becomes, and James Dean didn't get a chance to, and he died in that moment still, and so he's forever sealed in that moment of blossom, wow, you know, and I got old, and surviving fame is a weird thing. I certainly identify with that. And as far as you're concerned, you see me at 22, you know, as far as you're concerned, my greatest success was that. Nothing I ever do, even if I win Oscars now, I would still be the guy who was in Pretty in Pink, because it captures that nostalgia and that youth, is like you said. So there's something about that and reconciling that and knowing it's none of my business in a certain way. And I would never think of it as that was your greatest success. That kind of terminology and judgment wouldn't come into my mind. It'd be more that was beautiful. Well, I mean, on a public success, you know, culturally impacting way. It certainly probably was. At the time, if you were around at that time, it was very culturally impacted, which I was unaware of at the time, but it was very culturally impacted, the Brat Pack and those movies at that time. It was a big deal. And I don't think a moment like that could happen culturally now anyway, because we're so fractured. Whereas then, everyone was looking at the same direction. Everyone went to that movie on Friday night. Everyone. And that very rarely happens now. I'm sure you must have been sitting in front of the television some evenings looking at the cast of Friends going, "F*** you." I did. No, $1 million an episode. Oh no! By then I was like, okay, they were cultural icons, you know. But at the beginning, I was like, it's not that funny. It's not that good. But I guess, in a sense, you were the Friends cast that didn't get rewarded in the same way. When does the Crucible run until? We go until March 21. Wow. Thanks for agreeing to come on to the show. Thanks for having me. It's nice to talk to you. It's been a treat. Thanks for having me. Really. Thank you. Thank you.